Well, I put it like this. Some days I do, and some days I don't.
The story of Lionel Richie and Diana Ross is not just about two singers. It's about two empires colliding under the flashing lights of Motown's golden age. Their voices, combined on the immortal ballad Endless Love, created one of the most beloved duets in history. But behind the romance of the song was tension, rivalry, and a tangle of ambition that few dared to speak about. For decades, fans speculated, were they friends, rivals, lovers, or enemies in disguise? Now, the truth of what really went down between Lionel Richie and Diana Ross is finally emerging, and it changes everything. To understand what happened between Lionel Richie and Diana Ross, you first have to understand where they came from. Both were products of Motown, the legendary label that turned Detroit into the heartbeat of American soul. But while they shared the same house, they rose through its halls in very different ways. Diana Ross was already Motown royalty. As the lead singer of the Supremes, she became the face of the label in the 1960s. Songs like Where Did Our Love Go? And Stop in the Name of Love catapulted her to global stardom. Her voice was unique, smooth, emotional, instantly recognizable. But more than her voice, it was her ambition that made her unstoppable. Berry Gordy, Motown's founder, saw her not just as a singer, but as a star, a woman who could rival Hollywood's brightest. By the early 1970s, Ross was the queen of Motown, adored by fans and feared by rivals. Lionel Richie's path was different. He came up in the 1970s as a member of the Commodores, a band that cut its teeth in the sweaty, grinding world of funk and soul. With hits like Brick House, they dominated dance floors. But Richie was no ordinary funk musician. His songwriting, smooth, melodic, heartfelt, gave the band its biggest crossover hits. Easy, 3 Times a Lady. Still, slowly, he became Motown's new golden boy, the man with the pen that could make anyone cry. By the late 1970s, Diana Ross was the established queen, while Lionel Richie was the rising prince. Both had the voice, the charisma, and the ambition to dominate. And both knew it. Motown thrived on image, but behind the glitz was a ruthless competition. Artists fought for Berry Gordy's favor, for chart dominance, for headlines. Ross had long been the crown jewel, but whispers began. Was Richie the future? Could his songwriting and crossover appeal eclipse the queen herself? For Ross, whose entire identity was built on being number one, this was intolerable. For Richie, who had spent years in the shadows of a band, this was his moment to step into the spotlight. The stage was set for an uneasy collision. They were destined to meet, not as equals, but as two forces whose alliance would create beauty and tension in equal measure. When Lionel Richie and Diana Ross first crossed paths, it was not with fireworks, but with curiosity. Ross, already a superstar, carried herself like royalty. She expected deference, admiration, and often received it. Richie, though younger in fame, was no sycophant. He was ambitious, confident, and unwilling to be overshadowed by anyone, even the great Diana Ross. Their first true collaboration came at a pivotal moment for both. Ross was searching for her next big hit, something to keep her firmly on top. Richie, meanwhile, was itching to prove himself outside of the Commodores. His songwriting was already gaining attention. Kenny Rogers' Lady, written by Richie, had topped charts. If he could do the same for Ross, it would cement him as Motown's next crown jewel. When the two met in the studio, there was immediate chemistry. Ross admired Richie's songwriting, his ability to craft melodies that seemed to reach directly into the heart. Richie, in turn, was dazzled by Ross's presence. She wasn't just a singer, she was an event, a phenomenon. But admiration quickly gave way to tension. Ross was used to control. She had spent years working with Berry Gordy, shaping not only her career, but her image, her sound, her every move. She wasn't accustomed to being told what to do. Richie, however, wasn't intimidated. He knew what he wanted musically, and he wasn't afraid to push Ross to reach it. Their sessions became a tug-of-war, Ross demanding one thing, Richie insisting on another. Sparks flew, sometimes creatively, sometimes angrily. But it was precisely that tension that gave their work power. Richie's meticulous songwriting and Ross's dramatic delivery fused into something extraordinary. They both knew it, even if they didn't always admit it. There was electricity in the room, one producer recalled, but you couldn't always tell if it was love or war. Their first encounters laid the groundwork for endless love, but they also revealed a truth that would haunt their relationship. Lionel Richie and Diana Ross were too similar. Both ambitious, both proud, both unwilling to play second fiddle. Their partnership was destined to create brilliance, but it was also destined to crack under the weight of two giant egos colliding. By 1981, Lionel Richie was ready to step into the spotlight, and Diana Ross needed a song that would reaffirm her status as a star beyond Motown. Endless Love was born out of this collision of necessity and ambition, a duet that would become one of the biggest hits of all time, and the centerpiece of their complicated relationship. The song was written by Richie for the film of the same name. From the beginning, he knew it needed two voices, two stars whose chemistry would feel both romantic and larger than life. Diana Ross was the obvious choice. Her voice carried a vulnerability and strength that perfectly matched Richie's tender delivery. But convincing Ross wasn't easy. She didn't want to share the spotlight, least of all with a man some were calling Motown's new king. Eventually, the deal was struck. Ross would record with Richie, but the sessions were anything but smooth. Ross demanded perfection, sometimes re-recording lines dozens of times. Richie, meticulous in his own way, grew frustrated with her insistence on control. At one point, Ross allegedly walked out mid-session, furious that Richie had criticized her phrasing. Yet despite the tension, the result was magical. When their voices finally locked together, the effect was undeniable. Endless Love wasn't just a duet, it was a conversation, a confession, a declaration of passion. Fans swooned, critics raved, and the song soared to #1, staying there for 9 weeks. It became Motown's biggest hit of the decade. But behind the triumph were whispers. Was the chemistry real? Were Richie and Ross romantically involved? Or was it simply performance? The tabloids feasted on the rumors, speculating about a secret affair. Both denied it, but their body language on stage told another story. Lingering glances, touches that seemed more than professional. Whether true or not, the rumors added to the mystique, and the public couldn't get enough. Yet the success of Endless Love also deepened the cracks. Ross felt she had elevated Richie, giving him credibility as a solo artist. Richie felt he had given Ross her last great hit of the era. Instead of cementing a bond, the duet became a wedge. Each felt the other had gained more than they had given. The making of Endless Love was both a triumph and a curse. It created one of the greatest love songs in history, but it also planted the seeds of rivalry, jealousy, and resentment that would haunt Lionel Richie and Diana Ross for decades. When Endless Love was released, it didn't just dominate the charts, it dominated the cultural imagination. The song seemed to capture a romance so believable, so intimate, that audiences were convinced Lionel Richie and Diana Ross must have been living it. On stage, their chemistry was undeniable. Lingering gazes, tender touches, voices intertwining as if meant only for each other. But offstage, the reality was far more complicated and far less harmonious. Concert promoters quickly realized the song was more than a hit. It was a spectacle. Fans wanted to see Lionel and Diana together, to witness the magic of Endless Love in real time. When they appeared at awards shows and televised specials, the world melted. Lionel's boyish sincerity paired with Diana's regal poise was irresistible. They looked like soulmates, brought together by destiny. Behind the curtain, though, the picture was not so idyllic. Diana Ross was used to being the sole star. For years, her name had been above the title, her face on the poster, her presence commanding every stage she graced. Sharing that spotlight, even with someone as talented as Lionel Richie, was a bitter pill to swallow. Ross demanded top billing in promotional materials, bristled if interviewers focused too much on Lionel, and often insisted on wardrobe and staging that placed her at the center. Lionel, polite but ambitious, swallowed his frustrations in public, but fumed in private. He knew Endless Love was his song, his composition, his breakthrough as a solo artist. And yet, he often felt like he was playing second fiddle to Diana's larger-than-life persona. The tension showed in rehearsals. Accounts from crew members reveal sharp words exchanged during sound checks. Ross criticizing Richie's delivery, Richie snapping back about her domineering attitude. At one rehearsal, Ross reportedly refused to continue until her microphone level was raised above Lionel's, declaring, "The audience is here to hear me." Richie, humiliated, walked off stage. The incident was smoothed over, but the resentment lingered. Yet when the lights came up, everything changed. Their professionalism, and perhaps a flicker of genuine connection, allowed them to transform into the star-crossed lovers the audience wanted to see. The electricity wasn't faked. It was forged in the fire of their rivalry. The push and pull between them, the subtle battles for dominance, created a tension that made their performances thrilling. The public only saw the sparks. They didn't hear the backstage arguments, the cold silences, the managers scrambling to keep the fragile partnership intact. And perhaps that was the point. For Lionel Richie and Diana Ross, the stage was both battlefield and truce zone, a place where their conflicts dissolved into harmony, at least for the length of a song. But as the song's success grew, so did the egos involved. And soon, the whispers in Motown's halls would turn those sparks into a full-fledged fire. Motown was never just a record label. It was a kingdom, and every kingdom has its palace intrigue. By the early 1980s, the halls of Motown buzzed with whispers about Lionel Richie and Diana Ross. Some called them collaborators, others rivals, still others something far more scandalous. The success of Endless Love fueled speculation. Their chemistry was too convincing, their performances too intimate. Tabloids ran headlines suggesting a secret affair, fueled by reports of late-night studio sessions and whispered conversations caught backstage. Ross, long known for her relationships with powerful men, including Motown founder Berry Gordy, was painted as the mentor-turned-lover. Richie, still married at the time, was portrayed as her new conquest. Both denied the rumors, but neither did much to dispel them. In fact, some argued they leaned into the scandal, knowing it kept them in the headlines. But behind the smiles, the whispers cut deep. Ross hated the implication that she had made Richie, that his success was tied to her influence. Richie resented the suggestion that he was riding Ross's coattails instead of earning his place in the spotlight. Jealousy reared its head in other ways. Ross was reportedly furious when Lionel's solo career began to eclipse hers. His self-titled debut album produced hits like Truly, and within a few years, he was topping charts with Can't Slow Down, an album that sold over 20 million copies worldwide. Suddenly, Richie wasn't just Motown's golden boy. He was a global superstar, rivaling even Ross's legendary stature. Ross, meanwhile, was struggling to maintain her dominance. Though still a marquee name, her albums of the early 1980s didn't achieve the same massive success as Richie's. The Queen of Motown was watching her throne being threatened by the very man she had once shared a microphone with. The tension wasn't confined to music. Within Motown, allegiances shifted. Executives who once bowed to Ross began courting Richie, seeing in him the future of the label. Ross, fiercely protective of her status, felt betrayed. "This is my house," she reportedly told insiders. "I built Motown." To her, Richie's rise wasn't just about success. It was about encroachment. The jealousy and rumors fueled a growing coldness between them. Once willing collaborators, they now avoided each other at industry events. Their managers handled communication. Their smiles became forced. Fans clamored for a reunion duet, but both found excuses to avoid it. Motown's halls remembered their voices in harmony, but now the whispers were of rivalry, betrayal, and bitterness. The partnership that had created magic was unraveling, leaving behind only suspicion and speculation. By the mid-1980s, Lionel Richie and Diana Ross were no longer partners. They were competitors. The question on everyone's lips was simple: who outshone whom? Richie's solo career was unstoppable. With hits like All Night Long, Hello, and Say You, Say Me, he became one of the most bankable stars in the world. His crossover appeal was unmatched. Pop, soul, R&B, ballads, even dance anthems. He wasn't just a Motown artist anymore. He was a global phenomenon, winning Grammys, Oscars, and legions of fans across generations. Ross, meanwhile, remained a legend, but her dominance was waning. She left Motown in 1981 for a massive deal with RCA Records, a move meant to cement her independence. But while she continued to release albums and perform to adoring crowds, the cultural spotlight began shifting away. The Queen was still on her throne, but the kingdom was starting to look elsewhere. The press framed it as a battle. Headlines compared record sales, concert grosses, and award counts. Ross was often painted as the fading diva, Richie as the rising star. It was a narrative that enraged Ross, who insisted she was still at the top. For Richie, the comparisons were flattering but uncomfortable. He had no desire to publicly humiliate the woman who had once been his partner. But privately, he couldn't help but feel vindicated. For years, he had been dismissed as the Commodore guy. Now, he was the face of Motown's future. The competition extended to live performances. Ross's concerts remained theatrical extravaganzas, with glamorous costumes and dramatic staging. Richie's shows, by contrast, leaned on intimacy and emotion, audiences swaying to Hello or dancing all night to his upbeat hits. Fans debated endlessly. Who gave the better show? Who connected more deeply? Who truly ruled the stage? Industry insiders whispered that Ross's bitterness grew sharper. At one award show, she allegedly refused to present alongside Richie, claiming she would not play second banana. Richie, always diplomatic, brushed it off with a smile, but the chill between them was obvious. The battle for stardom wasn't just about numbers, it was about legacy. Ross had built Motown's empire in the 1960s and 70s. Richie was carrying it into the 1980s and beyond. Both were icons, but the torch had been passed, and not by choice. Their duet, Endless Love, once a symbol of harmony, now seemed ironic. A song about eternal devotion sung by two people locked in an endless rivalry. The love may have been a fiction, but the battle was real. And as both entered new chapters of their careers, the question remained: would they ever reconcile, or would the feud define them forever? To the public, Lionel Richie and Diana Ross's partnership seemed destined to last forever, immortalized by the words, "Endless Love." But behind closed doors, conflicts simmered, personal, professional, and deeply rooted in the politics of Motown. These were not simple disagreements about a song or a tour. They were battles over identity, status, and legacy, and they nearly destroyed what bond remained between the two. One of the biggest sources of conflict was creative control. Diana Ross, long known for her perfectionism, was unwilling to surrender authority to anyone, certainly not to a younger artist she viewed as still earning his stripes. Richie, however, was not the wide-eyed newcomer she might have once dismissed. By the early 1980s, he was a proven hitmaker, crafting songs that not only topped charts, but transcended genres. When the two collaborated, the question became, who was steering the ship? Ross demanded input on phrasing, arrangements, even marketing. Richie insisted his vision was the reason the music worked. The clash of two strong wills created fireworks, sometimes productive, more often destructive. Money also played a role. Contracts at Motown were notoriously complicated, with royalties and credits often disputed. Rumors spread that Ross demanded a larger share of the profits from Endless Love, arguing her name alone had elevated the track into an event. Richie's camp pushed back, pointing out that it was his songwriting and composition that made the song timeless. Behind the scenes, lawyers and managers argued while the artists themselves grew colder, each convinced the other was trying to take more than they deserved. Then there were the personal slights. Ross was said to have dismissed Richie at industry parties, downplaying his success when speaking to executives or reporters. Richie, hurt but proud, withdrew, surrounding himself with allies who reinforced his new role as Motown's centerpiece. In one particularly telling moment, Ross reportedly told a journalist that Lionel was talented, yes, but still learning what it means to be a star. For Richie, already filling stadiums on his own, the words cut deep. Complicating everything were the whispers of a romance. While neither ever confirmed an affair, the rumors refused to die. Insiders claimed Ross enjoyed the speculation, as it kept her in the headlines. Richie, married at the time, found the gossip damaging and resented being painted as her protégé-turned-lover. This difference in how they handled the scandal widened the rift further. By the mid-1980s, what had once been framed as one of the most powerful partnerships in music had soured into an unspoken feud. They stopped collaborating, avoided each other at events, and allowed years of silence to build walls between them. Fans wondered why the magic of Endless Love was never repeated, why two of Motown's brightest stars never recorded together again. The truth was simple. The bond had been poisoned by pride, jealousy, and suspicion. The conflicts were secret, whispered only among insiders at Motown and in Hollywood. But they were powerful enough to fracture a relationship that had once seemed unbreakable. And while both artists continued their own paths, the absence of collaboration spoke louder than any rumor. As the 1980s gave way to the 1990s, Lionel Richie and Diana Ross had all but drifted into separate universes. Richie was conquering the world with his solo career, while Ross was maintaining her legendary status through concerts, television appearances, and her enduring reputation as Motown's reigning diva. Yet the shadow of their duet lingered, and the world continued to wonder, would they ever reunite? There were attempts, some staged, some accidental. In the early 1990s, Ross reportedly reached out to Richie to propose another duet, hoping to rekindle the magic of Endless Love. Richie declined, citing scheduling conflicts, but insiders whispered the real reason was resentment. He didn't want to step back into her orbit, not when he had carved his own. For him, another duet would have meant playing into the narrative that Diana Ross had made him. At awards shows, the two often found themselves in the same room, even on the same stage, but the chemistry was gone. Their interactions were professional, polite, even warm at times, but there was no spark. The lingering bitterness, the unresolved conflicts, had cooled whatever flame had once burned between them. Fans never stopped asking. Journalists never stopped pressing. "When will you and Diana Ross sing together again?" became a question Richie could never fully escape. His answers grew more diplomatic over the years. "We had our moment," he would say with a smile. "It was magical." Ross, too, was evasive, insisting she loved working with Lionel, but dodging specifics. The silence between them became part of the legend, a cold gap that only fueled speculation. Meanwhile, both experienced personal struggles that could have united them, but instead drove them further apart. Richie endured health issues, a painful divorce, and periods of retreat from the spotlight. Ross faced criticism for her diva behavior, battles with the press, and the constant need to defend her place in music history. Each might have found comfort in the other, but neither reached out. The cold silence years became a testament to the fragility of artistic partnerships. For all the beauty of endless love, the two icons had never truly reconciled. Decades passed without a true reunion, each moving forward in their own lanes, both haunted by the song that had defined them together. Yet as time went on, the silence grew heavier. The older they became, the more obvious it was that the window for reconciliation was closing. And when Lionel Richie finally spoke openly about Diana Ross, it wasn't with anger. It was with something more complicated: regret. For years, Lionel Richie avoided speaking candidly about Diana Ross. He gave polite answers, carefully crafted tributes, and diplomatic phrases that revealed little. But as he entered his 70s, with decades of perspective behind him, Richie began to open up. And what he said stunned fans who had long speculated about what went wrong. In interviews, Richie admitted that the collaboration with Ross had been both a blessing and a curse. "Endless love changed my life," he said. "It took me from being a guy in a band to being Lionel Richie. But it also created expectations and rivalries that I wasn't ready for." He acknowledged that Ross had felt threatened by his rise, and that he, in turn, had resented her efforts to control the narrative. "I was young, ambitious, and maybe too proud," Richie confessed. "Diana was already an icon, and I think she felt I was stepping on her territory. We never talked about it. We just let it sit between us." He also addressed the rumors of romance. "We were never lovers," he said firmly. "But the way we sang, the way we connected on that song, it felt real. That's why people believed it. But behind the scenes, we were fighting as much as we were creating." Most striking was his tone of regret. Richie admitted he wished they had found a way to move past their differences. "We could have done more together," he said. "We could have made history beyond one song. But pride got in the way. Hers, mine, everyone's. And now, looking back, that's what hurts the most." His honesty reframed the story. The myth of endless love was no longer just about romance. It was about what was lost. Two legends had created magic, but let ego, jealousy, and silence prevent them from building on it. Richie's confession was less a scandal than a lament, a window into the pain of opportunities missed. For fans, it was bittersweet. They finally had answers, but the answers were tinged with sadness. The truth was that Lionel Richie and Diana Ross had been partners only briefly, and their inability to reconcile had left scars that never healed. The saga of Lionel Richie and Diana Ross is more than a tale of two artists. It's a lesson in the cost of fame, the fragility of partnerships, and the danger of pride. Their story reveals that behind every hit song, behind every glamorous performance, there are egos, insecurities, and battles unseen by the audience. Endless Love was more than a duet. It was a cultural moment, a song that seemed to embody eternal devotion. But the reality behind it was a fleeting collaboration between two people who never fully trusted each other. The very qualities that made them icons, their ambition, their charisma, their refusal to be overshadowed, were the same qualities that kept them apart. Fame amplifies everything. It turned Ross's need for control into infamy, Richie's ambition into resentment, and their chemistry into scandal. The whispers of romance, the rumors of betrayal, the battles for credit, all were fueled by the relentless spotlight of celebrity. But their story is also about betrayal, not necessarily of each other, but of what could have been. By allowing pride and rivalry to dictate their choices, both lost the chance to create more history together. Fans were left with only one song, brilliant though it was, instead of a legacy of duets that might have rivaled the greatest partnerships in music. In the end, Lionel Richie's late-life confession gives the story its tragic resolution. It wasn't hatred that kept them apart. It was silence. Silence where there should have been reconciliation. Silence where there could have been forgiveness. And perhaps that is the true lesson, that even legends are human, vulnerable to the same flaws that haunt us all. Fame does not protect against pride, nor does talent shield against insecurity. The story of Lionel Richie and Diana Ross reminds us that the most beautiful harmonies can be born from conflict, but they can also be silenced by it. The truth of Lionel Richie and Diana Ross is not endless love, but endless rivalry, tempered by regret, silence, and pride. Their story shows how fame can unite and divide in equal measure. What do you think? Was their bond ever real, or just performance? Comment below, and don't forget to subscribe.